Hey guys, Cinderrash here, and first off, let's start with the obvious. I haven't posted a lot of Warhammer 40k stuff in a while, and let's be honest, this game has pretty much run its course already due to the negligence of the development team releasing a product far before its intended release, and stability and everything else could have been sorted out. So, to be honest, even though I have 300, 400 hours into this game, I'm already pretty much burnt out on it. But it would be unfair of me, being the person who's kind of been going over a lot of the content in the game, penances and like that, to not finish out what I've started. So, once I finish up all the weapons for Zealot, Augur, and Psyker, as well as my Augur and Psyker build, I'm probably not going to post a lot unless it's more meme related or if it's about content updates or patch notes. I apologize in advance, but until Fat Shark actually fully releases the game, about, what is today, February 11th, as the time of recording, until they finish the game in about 6 to 12 months from now, when, Fat Shark actually fully releases their game, I'll probably cover more and actually be more interested in the game and have more stuff to do and more content to put forth and all that other stuff. But in the meantime, let's jump right into Zealot's Melee. So the first one we have is the Accatran Mark VIII Combat Axe. The Accatran Mark VIII Combat Axe has Strike Down and Versatile. It has Damage, Finesse, First Target, Mobility, and Penetration. The ones you're going to want to focus on is going to be Damage, Finesse, and Penetration. Or First Target, whichever one is more versatile for your situation. It has Strike Down as its primary action, its secondary action as well, and its special action is just a quick poke. Your available blessings are All or Nothing, Brutal Momentum, Decapitator, Decimator, Head Taker, Limb Splitter, Shred, and Thrust, as well as Thunderous. For this type of axe, the best one you would be looking for would be Decimator, as well as Brutal Momentum. Limb Splitter is not something you want to be looking for, as it just gives you negative damage to what you're trying to do with this kind of character, as well as Thunderous. Thunderous could be very good. Brittleness affects how much armor a character has and can actually reduce it, making Crushers that much more easier to take on. Next up, we have the best weapon in the game for Zealots, and by far, I would recommend this on any Zealot player, but there are a couple others that I would recommend. This weapon comes with Strike Down and Versatile. Its bonus stats are Cleave Targets, Damage, First Target, Mobility, and Penetration. For this one, I recommend Cleave Targets, Damage, and First Target as your main go-tos. Your primary action is Strike Down, your secondary action is Strike Down, and the special action is a quick poke. The additional and available blessings are All or Nothing, Brittle Momentum, Decapitator, Decimator, Head Taker, Limb Splitter, Shred, Thrust, and Thunderous. For this, I would recommend Brutal Momentum, as well as Decimator. You could also take Thunderous or Decapitator, depending on how strong your Antax is. All these are pretty well and good for the Antax, except for All or Nothing, as well as Limb Splitter. These will not help your damage all that much. Next up, we'll be looking at the strongest version of the Atrox Mark VII Tactical Axe. There's also the Mark II and the Mark IV. Those aren't as great because they won't be doing as much damage. You should always be looking for the higher number when it comes to weapons. This one comes with a specialization in Flurry and Assassination. Bonus stats are Critical Bonus, Damage, Finesse, Mobility, and Penetration. The ones you would want to be looking for are Critical Bonus, Finesse, and Damage. Primary action is Assassination. Secondary action is Strike Down. Special action is a fast combo with increased stagger but less damage. The available blessings are All or Nothing, Brutal Momentum, Decapitator, Decimator, Head Taker, Limb Splitter, and Shred. Blessings I would recommend are Brutal Momentum as well as Decapitator. Decimator is decent in this weapon, but not so much. And the other ones I would not recommend at all. Honestly, the Atrox and any assassination type weapons aren't going to be very good for the Zealot, and I'd highly recommend against them entirely. But if you prefer more single target and not trying to cleave down as many enemies as you would like, which I don't know why you would want to do that on Zealot, it's not a bad axe. Next up, we're going to be looking at the Cadia Mark IV Assault Chainsword. Sadly, chain weapons are kind of dog shit, except for the Eviscerator, and I'll talk about that more later. But there's no real reason to use this weapon. It's really weak, it's kind of dog shit, and again, it's a chain weapon, and the chain weapons really need a buff. So, we'll see about maybe getting a buff for it later on. Specialization. We have Versatile and Ravage. The bonus stats for damage, finesse, mobility, penetration, shredder. You're going to want to be looking for damage, finesse, and shredder. If you're going for more of a M1 ability. If you are going for using your special on the weapon, which allows you to chain through an enemy, I'd recommend damage, penetration, and shredder instead. So your actions, you get strike down and vanguard. Your special action, you can activate the chainsword to cause it to rev up and chain down an enemy. Available blessings, you have Bloodletter, Bloodthirsty, Devastating Strike, Rampage, Rev It Up, Savage Sweep, Shredder, Shred, in 2 different ways, Skull Crusher, and Wrath. Now, I would recommend a variety of different builds for this weapon depending on what you're going for. So this is going to take a minute. If you're going for more of an M1 build, I would recommend Ravage Sweep, or Wrath, or a combination of both, as well as Rampage. If you're going for more of a special ability use on this weapon, I would of course recommend Shred as well as Bloodthirsty, or Bloodthirsty and Devastating Strike. All those would be very useful for more of a focus on your special ability hits. Next up, we're looking at the Catachan Mark VII Devil Sword. I don't know why you would use this weapon. It is incredibly awful. The swing speed is terrible, the damage is terrible, and it's not that great of a cleave weapon. This comes with flurry and crowd control. I'd like to ask where, because it is just awful. We have the bonus stats of cleave damage, cleave targets, damage, finesse, and mobility. This is one of those rare weapons that actually requires basically all of these to be really good on it to even be worthwhile in the first place. So basically everything but mobility would need to be capped at 80% for this to even be a worthwhile weapon. Your actions are Vanguard, Relentless, with your special action has a parry. The parry is also very bad. I wouldn't recommend it, ever using it. There's only one character in one class that actually has a decent parry, and that would be the Psyker, and we'll talk about that later. So, your available blessings are Devastating Strike, Hammer Blow, Rampage, Savage Sweep, Shred, Skull Crusher, Thunder Strike, Vicious Slice, and Wrath. This is a weapon that you can focus on crit, but don't expect it to do a lot for you, which means that you could focus with these couple of abilities. You could focus with Shred as well as Devastating Strike on your weapon if you're going for more of a crit based one. But if you're looking for more of sweeping and doing a lot of damage to a lot of enemies, I would also recommend Savage Sweep and Rampage together. Of course, if worst case scenario, you could also do Rampage and Wrath, or Savage Sweep and Wrath to get as much sweep as you can onto as many targets as possible. Next up, we're going to be looking at what the worst Zealot players in the game entirely use, and I don't know why they exist or why this is a thing, but I hate you guys with a passion, and I swear to God, I hope you slip and fall, and a trapper just comes over and teabags your face. So, we're going to be looking at the Catachan Mark III Combat Blade. This comes with Swift Strike and Assassin. Bonus stats on damage, finesse, first target, mobility, and penetration. The Knife would be best with damage, finesse, and first target. Its primary actions are Assassin, Strike Down, and Punch. The available blessings for this are Executor, Flesh Terror, Haymaker, Lacerate, Mercy Killer, Precognition, Riposte, Ruthless Backstab, Shred, Smackdown, and Uncanny Strike. For this, I would recommend Lacerate, as well as a Mercy Killer. Of course, if you're going for more of a critical build, you could go Precognition and Flesh Terror. If you are doing more of I wish I was playing TF2, but the player base is dead and filled with bots, you could also go Ruthless Backstab as well as Riposte, which would allow for you to do more backstab enemies. You can also couple Ruthless Backstab with Uncanny Strike and be perfectly okay with that. Although, again, only clowns use knives. And really, do you want to be known as the Jared Leto of your team? Nobody wants that. Don't do it to yourself. Be better. Do better. Next up, we have the Crucis Mark II Thunderhammer. This weapon has received a lot of buffs, and it is still pretty awful, and the only reason you would use this is against a demon host with 3 other zealots to get your time to die, which needs you to kill a monstrosity within 5 seconds. This weapon could be a lot better if focused a little bit more on swinging a little bit faster, or if it had a little bit more power, but it just kind of falls short in terms of being the best melee weapon. But it's still pretty top tier, so don't let that get you down if you decide to use the Thunderhammer. This weapon comes with crowd control and obliterating, bonus stats of crowd control, damage, defenses, first target, and penetration. You're going to want to be looking for crowd control, damage, as well as penetration. Your actions are Strike Down, Relentless, and Activate. When you activate the Power Hammer, it gets a little bit of a thunderous charge, and the first enemy hit with it gets the full brunt of the damage. But if you do it with a heavy, it kind of scatters a little bit across all targets. It's a little weird how it works, but once you get it, you'll get used to understanding how it works. Available blessings, we have Hammer Blow, Head Taker, Momentum, Shock and Awe, Skull Crusher, Slaughterer, Thrust, Thunderous, Thunderstrike, and Trauma. For this, you could use Momentum, as well as Thrust. This will allow you to basically keep up on your toughness as much as possible as long as you're spamming them heavy attacks, as well as put out a decent chunk of damage. The Thunderhammer spamming with M1's not as great as just spamming the heavy. Of course, heavy attacks take a while to actually go through unless you build for speed, which sadly this doesn't do very well. Even with you doing a low health build, it just doesn't perform as well. Of course, if you're using this to just take down crushers and you're more of a gun-focused zealot, then you could definitely do Thunderous, as well as Shock and Awe. You could also do Hammer Blow with Thunderous, and those would definitely suit your needs for taking out crushers. Next up, we have the Indignatus Mark IV Crusher. This weapon was added after the community complained about the fact that we don't actually have 70 weapons. So they threw in 2 and, boosted us closer to having like 48 when you don't consider all the different tiers of a weapon. So, good on you, Fat Shark. So this power weapon basically works the same way as the Thunderhammer. It just has a couple different ways of working that we'll go over real quick. So it's a power weapon, and it also has Unstoppable. Bonus stats are crowd control, damage, defenses, penetration, and power output. For this, I would recommend crowd control, damage, penetration, and power output being the 4 highest ones that you need, with defenses being incredibly not as needed. So this is going to be one of those rare ones that requires basically all 4 of those to be close to 80% as possible. Actions, it's Relentless, Strike Down, and then you can press your special ability to activate it. The additional blessings are Hammer Blow, Skull Crusher, Thunderstrike, and Trauma. If you're going to be using this for mostly the M1 ability, I would recommend Hammer Blow and Trauma. If you're having a little bit of issues with some of the bigger enemies, you could also do Thunderstrike and Skull Crusher with your special activated, and it would perform okay. still not a great weapon. Next up, we have the weapon that nobody in existence has ever used, which is the Orestes Mark IV chain axe. If you said you've used this weapon, you're a fucking liar. Nobody's ever used the chain axe. I've never seen anybody in any of my games ever use a chain axe, because it's just awful, like all the other chain weapons except the Eviscerator. And if you start using it after this video despite me, you're a hipster. But that's okay, because you might set the meta, and you might actually make this weapon good, and you know what? I will give you a pat on the back and a fucking smooch. So, we have specialization in high damage, fucking wear, and ravage. Bonus stats are damage, defenses, mobility, penetration, and shredder. I would recommend damage, penetration, and shredder for this, where defenses and mobility aren't super needed. Actions is strike down, vanguard, and then you can do your special action, activate it, just like all other chain weapons, and make it slice through things. The available blessings are Bloodletter, Bloodthirsty, Headtaker, Rev It Up, Shred, Slaughterer, Thrust, and Thunderous. If you're looking to use this as a chain weapon, you're going to be looking for Bloodletter and Bloodthirsty. Or you could make this more focused about criticals, which you can then do Bloodthirsty and Shred. Or if you're looking to just be a crazy maniac who just charges his weapon all the time, you could also do Rev It Up and Bloodthirsty, allowing you a lot more movement speed to just kind of run around and do whatever you need to do. If you're going to be using this for more heavy hitting, you're going to want to be using Thrust with Slaughterer. Or if you're going to be spamming this with M1 with the occasional rev ups for the bigger enemies, such as the Crushers, so you can penetrate through their armor, I'd recommend Slaughterer and Thunderous. Next up is the worst axe in the entire game, the Rashad Mark II. Honestly, it is just a horrible weapon overall, and I don't know why you would want to use it, but hey, if you want to, awesome. Maybe you'll find a way to actually make this weapon good, but I highly doubt it. So this comes with Strike Down, Versatile. Bonus stats are Damage, Finesse, First Target, Mobility, and Penetration. This is a single target axe, so you're going to want to be focusing on basically 4 of these again, which is Damage, Finesse, First Target, and Penetration. Closest to 80% you can get, where mobility is not super needed. Your primary action is Strike Down, your secondary action is Strike Down, and your special action is a special melee combo that pokes. The special action is a quick poke that ignores stagger reduction, increases impact and damage versus armored enemies. Your available blessings are All or Nothing, Brutal Momentum, Decapitator, Decimator, Headtaker, Limb Splitter, Shred, Thrust, and Thunderous. For this weapon, you can take Thrust and Decapitator to ensure that all you're doing with this axe is especially what it's made for, which is killing one enemy at a time to do as much damage as possible. You could also try to pair Decapitator with Brutal Momentum, or Decimator with Brutal Momentum, although since this is a single target axe, it is a lot more difficult, as well as the weak base damage on it to actually kill a lot of things. Next up, we have the best chain weapon in the game, hands down. It is a beautiful weapon for the Zealot, so if you want to use a chain weapon, this is probably the one for you. This has Unstoppable and Ravage as its specializations. Bonus stats in Cleave Target, Damage, Penetration, Mobility, and Shredder. This is one that I highly recommend that you get. Again, Cleave Target's Damage, Penetration, and Shredder as close to 80% as possible, where mobility is not needed. But even if one of these is a little bit lacking, like Shredder, it is still a very, very good weapon. So this has a primary action of Vanguard, a secondary action as Strike Down, a special action of Activate, which allows you to rev up your chainsword and slice something down. For this, I would recommend Momentum and Perfect Strike, or Momentum and Savage Sweep. You could also do Savage Sweep and Rampage. If you're wanting to go Shred crazy, you could do Shred and Bloodthirsty, or Shred and Perfect Strike. You could also do Wrath and Savage Sweep. This is a very versatile weapon depending on what you need R4 and what blessings you kind of get or manipulate into eventually. Especially with the crafting system slowly coming out, and I mean slowly, very slowly, coming out, you'll be able to change one of the perks and make it a little bit better over time. And hopefully you have a lot of fun with this weapon. It was one of my favorites until I got the Antax. And I would probably place this just slightly under the Antax. Last but not least, we have probably a horrible, horrible weapon. This is, again, a weapon I haven't seen anybody use, and it seems pretty weak from the one time that I did try to use it, because I rolled a 500 rating on it, and it was just awful. So for this weapon, we have Cleaving, Strike, and Strike Down as its specializations. Bonus stats in Cleave Damage, Cleave Targets, Damage, and First Target. For this one, I would highly recommend Damage, Cleave Target, and Cleave Damage. Primary action of Vanguard, Relentless, with a special action of a Backslash. The available blessings are Brutal Momentum, Death Blow, Devastating Strike, Head Taker, Perfect Strike, Rampage, Savage Sweep, and Wrath. Some of the blessing combinations that I would recommend would be Brutal Momentum and Wrath. You could also do Savage Sweep and Wrath, Rampage and Savage Sweep, Rampage and Wrath, Devastating Strike and Perfect Strike, although this weapon is not very good for its crit. I would recommend Brutal Momentum and Savage Sweep, just so you have a lot of sweeping damage and you can ignore the enemy hit mass, so you're hitting enemies all around. And that is it for the Zealot melee weapons. Let me know what your guys' favorite is down below. Let me know if this list has helped you better choose your next weapon to use, or maybe your next favorite weapon. And I hope to hear from you guys in the next one, where we go over Zealot's ranged weapons. You guys take care and stay awesome.